All right, we are at 10:15. I know it feels like, whoo, 10:15, we're gonna get started. I cannot tell you how excited I am about this session. I have had the honor of working with these two lovely ladies from Burgettstown for a couple of years now, and they are an absolutely dynamic 8th grade team within the district. So I am so excited to be able to introduce them today. My name is Lisa Coleman-Bull. I come out of the Patton West office, if you haven't seen me already. But we just want to take care of a few housekeeping things. Your presenter handouts, those are all, if you haven't been with us before now, those are all inside of that link that's there. You can download those from there. We also would love for you to tweet out if you're there. We will make sure that we get those. Well, I'll double check. I'll try to figure out where those are. We'll make sure that we get everything up and running. And then thank you for letting me know so that you didn't see the handouts. We'll see if we can't make sure that we get those up. I'll double check with our little tech department. So then if you want to access closed captioning will be enabled. So you can definitely access closed captioning if you need that. And then you can just click the button at the bottom of the screen. And in addition, we are in a webinar. And so because it's a webinar, the mics are muted and the chat is set for us to the hosts and panelists. So at this point, now that'll probably change likely because these lovely ladies have said they're more than happy to have you just on mic and ask a question. So we are very, very excited for you to join me. And with no further ado, let me introduce to you. So we have with us today, Jamie Smith. She is an 8th grade ELA teacher from Burgettstown Area School District, and April Egal. She is also an 8th grade English teacher from Burgettstown Area School District. So thank you so much for joining us, ladies. We can't wait to see your presentation.
Thank you, Lisa. First of all, can you hear me? Because it says my computer is muted now, so.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you. As Lisa said, April and I are a team at Burgettstown Middle School. I am the English teacher and April is the literature teacher. So we work together to implement all the craziness in the world between ELA. So our students have 40 minutes of English a day and 40 minutes of reading a day. So we were asked to present on MTSS strategies during the Impossible, the multi-tiered system, systems of support, because we were asked to start doing this in the spring of 2020. So when it was first introduced to the district, they said, let's take a look and where are we? So as I said, we are part of Burgettstown School District. Our school is from grades 6 through 12. There are 549 students in our district. And as you can see, there's not much diversity in our district. Almost half of our students are free and reduced, and 22% of our students receive special education services. So how did we get roped in? As I said, this was introduced to our district in March of 2020, around there. And the summer of 2020, I was the current union president at the time, and I was in the middle of a meeting with the superintendent and other department heads and everyone you could possibly think of to figure out how in the heck we were going to come back to school in August of 2020. And that is when Michelle Burton, our director of special education, called me and said, hey, do you want to try this out, this MTSS strategies? And I said, sure, because there's nothing else going on right now, so why not? In April.
So good morning, everyone. I am April Egal. How did I get roped into MTSS? Well, I was, like Jamie said, it was the summer of 2020. Everything was crazy and completely unknown and just sort of like, what the heck is going to happen here? Jamie and I are good friends, so I knew that there were talks about like how we were possibly going to go back to school. And Michelle Burton called me while I was on my way to drop my daughter off at a summer camp. And that was stressful enough because I was like, I don't know if I should do this, but you know what? You got to get out of the house a little bit. So I was taking her to farm camp in the middle of the woods when Michelle called me and interrupted my navigation system to ask me about this. And I got her on the phone, we were chatting, dropped the call a couple different times, and then finally she got back to me and we worked it out. She asked if I wanted to be involved in the MTSS trainings and implementation, and I wasn't really sure what that meant. But I was like, okay, I guess so, because that's just what I do. That's just what Jamie and I do. Say, okay. And that's how we got roped into it. We didn't know what we were doing. We just said, sure.
So the reason Burgettstown was asked to be a part of this, or did the investigation to take part of the grant, is because, you know, no matter what we did, growth wasn't happening. If it was happening, it was so small that it was very minuscule. So we knew what we needed to do. We needed to learn and implement new strategies, because we have always been ones to go out and try to find evidence. We've always been trying to find resources, but everything is just piecemeal, piecemeal, piecemeal. So we're like, okay, if you're going to give us a way to put this all together into one system, sure, we'll do it.
We knew that there had to be an easier way. And like Jamie said, we constantly were revamping, constantly working to add more rigor, add different levels of questioning, add different pieces to the puzzle. And it just never felt right. It never felt like we had all of it together. So when we started to learn about MTSS, we were like, okay, maybe this will be the piece that we're missing, because we wanted to leverage the evidence-based practices in a more streamlined way without having to find them all on our own all of the time, and then not really being sure if we were doing it right.
So as I said, I was in the meetings to try to figure out how we were going to come back to school. So when we came to school for the 2020-2021 school year, we started out with A and B days with students who were virtual every day, and everyone was at home on Wednesdays. So for example, we would have Monday and Tuesday, we would have a group of students who were considered the A students. Wednesday, everyone was at home. Then Thursday and Friday, we had a group of students who were considered the B students. Now, when you were an A student and you were at home on a B day, you were supposed to log into class and join class remotely, and vice versa. That wasn't happening. We had students who barely even joined. We didn't even know who they were until February. Because at the beginning of November, after Halloween, we were shut down and we went fully virtual until mid-February. And then when we came back in February, we were back to 4 days, with Wednesdays, everyone being virtual. And once again, everyone was supposed to join. And then kids were in and out of school / virtual, and there were actually 10 students who stayed virtual the entire year.
So 2020, 2021 was just a year of unknown, which if you work in a school district, you know that for sure. There was no real routine in place until when we came back to school 4 days, we started to get some headway. We started to get a little bit of routine going so that the students knew what to expect, which in turn helped us know what to expect and then made things flow a little more smoothly.
So we began our full day trainings for MTSS in October of 2020. Now, this was at the end of October, so we stayed home that day, and then the next time that we had it, almost every other training was virtual. So it worked out for us because we were at home, but when we were trying to grasp all of the information presented to us, it was a lot. And it was difficult to implement any strategies because there was no consistency, as April said. It was very difficult to meet the needs of our students when they weren't even logging on.
Yeah, like Jamie said, being at home for the training was very helpful for us just as people who were in trainings. But implementing anything as a teacher was next to impossible because that year was just impossible. So there was a lot of planning going on, but not much change in our instruction, because up until December, was it December that we started following the schedule?
Yes.
From the entire month of November, it was us with office hours and posting things in our Google Classroom and students logging on if they wanted to meet with us, which didn't happen. We got a few emails a day, and it was just a lot of chasing down kids who had zeros. But once the virtual full day or schedules started to happen, where the students were expected to follow the bell schedule, we were then able to start to do some things with MTSS, because then we had kids being held accountable for checking in and being in the classes. And that was in December of that year. That was the first time that we started to have any sort of consistency where we could even learn who our students were. So it was like just impossible. It was impossible to figure out what we were doing, essentially.
And our district didn't require the students to have their cameras on. So there were students in class who were definitely not in class.
Yes.
So it did not make it any easier either. So how we actually got started, the district started with Easy CBM for us. This was the first year that we used Easy CBM as a diagnostic tool.
And we didn't really get much training on what to do with it other than give these students this comprehension, this vocabulary, and this fluency test. And that was it. So we did that, but didn't have any idea of what to do with that.
And through MTSS, the Smarter Balance rubrics were introduced to training. So I started to implement those into class, where I would teach the narrative essay, and then the students, we would follow the rubric that was used through MTSS with the Smarter Balance. Then I also started using the START pod. And I don't know if you're familiar with START pod, but when we use this system, it's a 3-minute quick write for our students. So everyone is given a different topic, whether it's narrative, argumentative, or informational, and they are given a topic, and they have 1 minute to think, and then 3 minutes to respond. And it shuts down at 3 minutes, whether you're mid-typing or not. And students would get so frustrated if they weren't able to finish their thought. So this was an excellent tool, and I found even this year how wonderful it is for the kids to use.
In my class, once we started back into in-person instruction, I began to implement a couple things as well. So one of the things recommended was vocabulary search. There's a book A and a book B, and that's for the 95% group. When I started looking at it, I was like, wow, this is elementary. This is going to be a tough sell to these kids, because it talks about base words. It talks about Greek combining forms, Latin root words, prefixes and suffixes. And when you start with it, it's basically reminding you of the rules of ing, ed, es. And the kids were like, what are you teaching us? We did this in like 3rd grade. And we teach 8th grade, so that's how they talk to us. But as we continued on, I was able to tailor it to a more mature level. I worked with the kids, and we would build words, because there was a routine that we went through each day where we were introduced to I don't know, we'll just say it's the prefixes. There's 5 prefixes that we were using on that day. And then it would give us a base word to add them to, and we would do word building. So they would build the words that were given to us, and then we would start talking about situational words. And I think that this was really where, as an 8th grade teacher, this was powerful, because I would explain to them that there are situations where things are happening where you can make up a word. That's kind of the beauty of our language, is you can make up a word, and if we're in the same situation, I understand it, you understand it. So if you can tell me what that situational word means, then we'll allow it. And we would create, because I use this with my advanced classes as well as my regular classes. Advanced kids got really involved in creating these situational words and then arguing why they were actually words, because they knew the meaning. My regular classes, even my lowest students in my regular classes, were feeling empowered using this, because they had the word parts in front of them. They had the morphemes, they had the base words, they had the Latin roots, whatever it is that we were working with. And they were able to figure things out, because even if they were wrong, they could say, well, I thought it meant this. And I would say, if that were actually a word, that would mean that. And like, what situation could we use this in? So they didn't quite, I don't know, they didn't use situational the way that the advanced kids did, but they were really able to build words and feel success. And the more we got into using vocabulary surge, the more confident they got in creating words, figuring things out with words, helping each other with words, and participating in class, which was really cool to see, because I didn't expect that with something that looked so elementary, but it was definitely beneficial to us. And then Building Comprehension in Adolescence, what is a book that has different strategies for reading and writing in the content areas. And I focused, there's a lot of different resources in that particular book for self-regulating and working through, helping the students find ways to work through things on their own. Some of the reading strategies that are in there were really useful to me during that time. That was essentially, those were the only two things I could do in 2021 before the PSSAs and then afterwards. But using both of these materials was really, it was interesting to see the growth and the kids working on their own and like thinking for themselves rather than just waiting for me to tell them what to do.
So this was our Easy CBM data from the fall into winter. So you'll see the fall scores we were in person, but when I say in person, we had half the class here on Monday, Tuesday, the other half on Thursday, Friday. So the score, you'll see there were tier 1 was okay, great. Tier 3, the same. So you look in the winter Easy CBM, now winter, we did fully virtual. So you'll see there wasn't much change in anything that was happening.
In fact, there was a slight decrease because tier 1's where you want to be, but it was the tier 1 went down, tier 2 went down, and tier 3 went up, which to us was like, okay, great. Nobody's trying. They're not actually doing anything. And you could see that like the kids just kind of flew through things because they had to, not because they were actually trying.
And then the Smarter Balance rubric, as I talked about. So in October, once again, in person, the scores were based out of 5 points, or I'm sorry, out of 8 points. And you'll see that it totally decreased in virtual in February. This was before we came back to school full time, and we had none in the green. And so we were devastated.
And October was with very little instruction too. That was the first go at it.
Yes.
With a little bit of instruction, but Jamie was just trying to figure out what to do with it. And we were like, I don't know.
I've taught writing for years, but putting the lens into the smarter balance was different. So, and as we said, we were tiptoeing into this. And then our start pod, which was, I felt, our saving grace. So winter was virtual. And then the spring data was in person. So everyone was here when they took the start pod. And as I said, they loved it because it's a 3-minute thing. They're done in 3 minutes. And then I share with them where they fall. And then they set goals for themselves. And they said, oh, this is cool. Okay, next time I can do this. Next time I can do this. And so we finally saw some growth. And we were like, okay, maybe we are doing something right, because we just felt demoralized because everything it just seemed that we were doing, we were just not seeing anything. And then they took the PSSA. And we were for sure going to find that they did nothing, did horribly. And these were our scores. And
as you can see in the bottom section, we were the only one that met any sort of growth. And I think we were shocked, actually. I don't know what I expected. I expected it to be just like all of the other scores that we see on here. Below, well below, just not really growing. And there was some growth, which is wild to me. It's wild to me that, that we made it, like we did it.
And then we said, okay, maybe we did do something right in the midst of all this chaos. And when we looked at the growth by school achievement group, you'll see, where the 6th grade and the 7th grade fell, and then where we were. Now, of course, we're not all above, but we were 3 above, so that we were super happy with these scores. Unbelievable. Like, we could not believe that any of this was happening. So we said, okay, if we can do this
with the little amount of time that we did anything, and we really felt like we were doing, I don't want to say bare minimum, but we felt like we weren't doing enough at the time. And just doing this survival tactics teaching, this happened, we were like, wow, like we could do this. Like we can actually do this.
So we said, all right, let's bring on 21-22 school year.
Okay, so if you wouldn't mind just for 1 second, there were a couple of things that came up in the chat. Can you go back to that last slide for me? I just want to explain to the field, for people who are not in Pennsylvania, this is considered what we call our quintile report. So the students in Pennsylvania, when they take this, they're divided into 5 subgroups by 20%. So the students that you're seeing on the very left-hand side of the grid that's here on the right under 8th grade, that's the lowest. Those students scored in the lowest 20% within the state. So in comparison to, you know, in their scores range within the lowest 20%, and then you kind of move up, and those ones at the top. So that's in there as well. So that's even more exciting in the data. A couple of the questions that came up was, one, with all of the students missing, submitted work, inconsistent attendance, how did they do really on their quarterly reports? And what were some of the things, how did you work with that system?
Well, I mean, it was probably the lowest averages we had ever seen. That particular year was my 15th year here at Burgettstown, my 15th year teaching in a teaching position, and it was the lowest I had ever seen for sure. There were so many emails. There were so many parent contacts. I had a parent give me the kid's cell phone number, and I'm on the phone with a boy talking him through because he wouldn't log on to the classes during the class time. So I talked to him on the phone while he did his work. It was a lot of extra effort on the teacher's part for sure. Which for me, like, that's what I do. That's who I am, and that's what I do. This year, this 21, 22, I really worked hard to set boundaries for myself, because in 2020, 2021, all boundaries were gone. I was calling cell phones. I was emailing 3 or 4 times a day. I was setting, outside of my own academic time, setting meetings with students individually because they didn't want to meet with the whole class, but they wanted to talk to me individually. Like, it was exhausting.
And we had a different schedule where the students actually, when we were in the building, left an hour earlier than they normally did. So we had an hour at the end of the day where we were supposed to meet with students, and you would have groups that would show up. You would have set meetings, and you just sit there and nobody would show. And that's when you're calling and saying, hey, are you going to get on? And you're calling mom, you're calling dad, you're calling
extension 300,
Sorry.
please. I'm sorry, not Keith. Craig, sorry.
Calling anyone you possibly can to get them to log on. It was
like sales. It was like sales.
It was. Please come. We're here. Let us help you.
Let me help you.
We do know what we're doing. Like, just give us a shot. And the scores, you know, the students ended up, everyone kept whatever grade that they had and moved on to the next grade level.
Yeah. So even if they didn't technically pass for the year, they were moved on to they moved on to 9th grade in 21, 22. I did, while Jamie was talking, I wanted to backtrack and say, we have been using Google Classroom and that platform for a while. So our students were used to assignments being posted in Google Classroom. I can't say that all of our teachers have used it. Jamie and I used it for several years prior to this. So at least we had that going in our favors, that the kids knew what to do with it. We knew what to do with it. And we were able to kind of leverage that knowledge and get connected with the kids in as many ways as possible, I guess. Lisa, you're muted.
Yep, great,
Okay.
thanks. And then we have, so there were just a couple of specific questions to a couple of the interventions that you mentioned. One was vocabulary surge. So the first one is the vocabulary surge AB book. Is it grade specific or is there an 8th grade book? You had mentioned it was a little more elementary kind of looking. And then the other one was, how is the Start PAW graded, manually or on the program?
Okay, so the vocabulary surge is not necessarily grade specific. I believe it says like 3 to 9 on it, but it starts with very elementary morphemes and then grows from there. But in my experience, kids don't know what a lot of these morphemes mean. So it was not completely futile to do it. It was beneficial to do it and then to work a little more deeply. When you look at it, it looks elementary and you're like, ugh, because I looked at it, I talked to Lisa about it, I looked at it again, I was like, okay, we'll get it. And then I got it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is low. But then once the kids started using it, they started with, wow, this is really low. What are you having us do, Mrs. Eagle? This is 3rd grade stuff. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, if you get it all, we won't have to do it. And then they just, they didn't know what they meant. So I'm like, okay, I guess we need to do this. And I was able, like I said, I was able to kind of zhuzh it up, kind of customize it to the older kids. If I was in a particular class that had higher achievers, I was able to push them to build more words, to add more prefixes and suffixes to the base or the root and create a more complex word. So it really does give you that ability. And then once you use a prefix or a suffix, like I had lists on my board and they could add those. And I said, hey, if it's something we've already done, you can add it to what we're working on this week and create an even more complex word. So it got to, that was how I brought it up to the 8th grade level. That's how you could bring it up to a 9th grade or 10th grade level. That's how you could bring it back to a lower level, is just by what you're expecting of them and knowing your kids and knowing what they like, how far to push them.
And as far as the Start PAW, it is through a patent that provides this a resource and it grades itself. There's nothing that I have to do. And so then I get the report and I can see where they stand and it'll give you suggestions of remediation that this kids could are needing. And so from there, we talked about what we could do to increase, you know, it takes into fact the number of characters they use when they type, the length of words, etc. So it's an excellent resource that I really don't have anything that I have to do for it other than assign it.
That's it.
Okay.
So you're good right now. Yeah. Keep
Great, thank you.
So 21-22, we're back in person,
Let's do this.
5 days a week. Yay!
All right, so again, a whole shift because we were working 4 days a week the year, not working 4 days a week, but we had 4 days of teaching last year. With Wednesdays, the students were virtual. A lot of that time we were able to work from home. By the end of the year, we were asked to come into the building. The lights just went off because we aren't moving. And then the kids went home an hour early, so we had all of that extra time as well. And this year, back to the grind, 5 days a week in person, regular schedules, do it like we've never missed a beat. Teachers, go for it. Except for we had masks, we had shields on our desks, we had very strict contact tracing that our district chose to utilize. So we had a lot of absences, extended absences, 5-10 day absences. And it seemed like every time I started some sort of project or something, like I was the catalyst. I would start a project and the next day we would have like a mass quarantine going on of like 10, 15 students out. And our class last year in 21-22 was 82 students. So 10 to 15 of those kids was a big bulk of it. So even though we were back to normal, we weren't back to normal. We were still working to overcome that. When the kids were out for quarantine, if they were well enough to log on, we asked that they would log on to the Google Classroom and we would live stream. But I think like 2 kids ever did that. And then the other ones were like, 10-day vacation, cool. We don't have to do anything, which was not the case. Like, we still expected them to do things. If a student was actually sick, we took that into consideration and did what we would do if a student was actually having like a serious illness, no matter when, and maybe excuse them from some things, but you still, I mean, there's still things that you have to accomplish, and a lot of the quarantine kids were not accomplishing those things.
Right, and so we spent a lot of time catching kids up when they came back. So we have a time at the end of the day called Blue Devil Block, which is like a study hall essentially, where our middle school students can come to their individual teachers and work with them, make up work, make up tests, etc. So we were spending a lot of time doing that, and it was getting to be just as exhausting as the previous year.
We didn't do any MTSS training this year because Jamie and I were the ones who did the training the year previous, but the 7th and 9th grade were attending the trainings and starting to get a little bit of the information that we got the year previously. For implementation, we continued to do the easy CBMs, except for we knew how to look at the data this year, which was helpful. Jamie continued started Step Up to Writing.
Yes.
And continued Start PA. You want to talk about Step Up to Writing?
Yeah, Step Up to Writing is a program that, excuse me, it's a book, it's grade span specific. So I have the 6th through 8th grade book. And in that book, there are all the different ways that you can implement, excuse me, different writing strategies. So even though it's 6th grade could be doing the same, assignments are different because you are putting forth the sorry, the lights are just totally distracting. This is just Burgettstown for us. I'm sorry. This is just what happens around here. So the you would have whatever prompt based for 8th grade, even though you're all teaching the same strategy, it's an 8th grade prompt as opposed to a 6th grade prompt. And then this school year, the 9th grade teachers have purchased the 9th through 12th grade book, and I worked with them this week actually on how to implement the exact same thing. And I said, so now we are going to be using the same terminology throughout, which is something that we've lacked for many, many years. And as she said, I continued with the Start PA, and that is one of their favorite do now assignments because they can just sit down 3 minutes and it's finished, and they can see how well they did. And they always wanted to make sure they finished their thought before the 3 minutes was over.
A lot of competitive.
Yes, very competitive.
So this year I did vocabulary book surge book A, finished book A around December and passed that on to the 7th grade English teacher. And she started it downstairs, and then I started book B. I did the same strategies with it. I had word building competitions with the kids where we would get just big chart paper, and I would give everybody 5 minutes, and they would look at the lists of words. They would build as many words as possible, combine, and then the kids who had the longest list of like legitimate words and could explain what they meant the class period that did, they would win a prize. And I made it real competitive because, like Jamie said with the Start PA, they're fighting to finish their thought. They're fighting to build the most words. I like leveraging that competition aspect was huge this year for me.
And they were, and the results were hanging in the hallway, so they would see that their class period was behind. No, it's not going to happen.
Yes, it was a big deal. And if they lost by just a couple words the next week when we did it, because I would do this on Fridays, we would go through the lesson throughout the week. I didn't mention it before, but we have 40-minute classes. My first 10 minutes every single day is vocabulary. So we come in, that's their do now, open up vocab surge, lesson, whatever, day, whatever, and they will get started on it immediately. And that gives me time to take attendance. And then they're working on it. I give them a couple minutes to talk to each other and fix any mistakes. And then we very quickly go over it. Sometimes I give them the answers, and sometimes I say, okay, who wants to be the teacher? Or I will toss markers out and let people come up and write things on the board just so that they can check it. So I do different things with that, but that takes about 10 to 15 minutes. I try to keep it in there. I mean, if something's going on and we go over that, it is what it is. It's a teachable moment. And then I continued to use the building comprehension strategies with the literature that we were reading. Or no, I'm sorry, the informational text that we were reading. And then the other major thing that we did differently this school year was we created an intervention group. Jamie talked about that 40 minutes at the end of the day that's called Blue Devil Block. We purchased Third Quest at the end of the 2020-21 school year so that we could look at creating this intervention group in the 21-22 school year. And we didn't start it until after Thanksgiving break, but we looked at some different pieces of information. I mentioned that we knew how to look at the easy CBM scores by this point, primarily thanks to Lisa. She really worked hard with us. So I want to give a shout out to her because like, I feel like even though we went through all this training, if it wasn't for Lisa answering our questions and having meetings with us, I would still feel like, I don't know what I'm doing here. So Lisa, thank you. But we looked at our easy CBM scores that we knew how to read at this point, and we looked at the trends in the data. We looked at their scores from their 7th grade easy CBMs, which we knew were a little bit skewed because we were in school with that weird schedule. We were out of school taking the easy CBMs. And then at the end of the year, we were in school in the spring. But by that time, the kids were like, I'm done with this. I'm not like really interested in trying. So whatever. We looked at the 8th grade fall easy CBM scores when they took them with us. And then we combined and selected students in the tier 2 area. And we were going for kids who were not in special ed. We ended up actually taking, I wrote one special ed student here, but I forgot that we had 2 actually. One was in an additional reading class, but he had room in his schedule to also be with us in our intervention group. And then there was another student who was not in an additional reading class. She was in all the regular education classes. She just happened to be special ed as well. So I lied when I typed the word one. I was thinking about the reading class that he was in. And we monitored their performances in their ELA classes, looked at their grades, looked at their writing samples and things like that, and reading comprehension, and determined that there was a group of about 11 kids that we thought should pilot this intervention group. We only ended up with 8 though. One of those kids was there for the first like 3 weeks of school and then had knee surgery and didn't come back until January. One started in the group and he moved a couple weeks into the intervention group, and we can't do anything about that. Another student, he was out on quarantine when it started. He came back 2 weeks into it and he was like, I don't want to be here. I thought this was like a directed study where you were going to help me with my homework, and his father opted him out. So we ended up with 8, which was fine. So looking at this, go ahead, Jim.
Okay, so this is what we tested them monthly with their fluency, their reading comprehension, and their vocabulary. So using the Third Quest material, it is a book that basically is scripted for you. You follow what it tells you to read. The students read to you. It's a I say, you say type thing. It's there was no planning for us that we needed to do, and we thought that was a great thing. And at first we were very concerned that it was lower level as well and a little too elementary, but the story, they were really into it, because there's a companion book that goes along and you read this story about these group of kids who get sucked into the like 23rd dimension or something. And so their quest is to find their way back home. And so part of it, as I said, we were testing their fluency. You'll see from January to May, we saw a lot of growth. Now, Richard is the one student that April was speaking of, who is our lowest of the low students, who had technically had 3 reading classes a day. And we saw one amazing growth with this student.
And confidence. His confidence level was through the roof. Like by the end of it, he was participating, he's raising his hand, he is volunteering to read out loud and leading discussions. One of the cool things about using Third Quest is it, like Jamie said, it's super scripted, but the routine is the same each day. So it's meant for an 85-minute block. We have 40. So we had to break it in half. Day one was what we call the EEOOs. It was basically working on fluency and understanding word parts and being aware of what you're reading. So it went through rhyming words, it went through nonsense words, it was just a pattern of reading again and again. And then you would do sentence building where you would start with small parts of a sentence and then repeat it and read more. And it was a lot of repetition. At first, the kids were like, this is so dumb. But as we went through and they would make mistakes and I would call them out, where Jamie would say, now we need to do this again. Like, I heard somebody not say it right. All of the kids are reading in chorus. So if somebody makes a mistake, it kind of gets covered up. And a lot of times they were like, who did that? Who did that? And you didn't have to own up to it if you didn't want to. By the end, they owned up to it and laughed about it. But at first they were kind of embarrassed. They wanted the door shut. They wanted, don't let anyone in here and things like that. So it was a lot of trust building at the beginning. First day was that portion of it. And then the second day we would use the reader and begin reading the story of the third quest. And that was their favorite day. It's completely scripted on that end too. You have the reader, the bolded words are what the kids read out loud in chorus. The non-bolded words are what the teacher or facilitator reads to them. There are places, embedded questions in the story where you just stop. I will, this is geared toward 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade, even though it felt a little low. They're as you can see, their fluency increased so much that I don't care how low it felt. It was beneficial to these kids. It was so beneficial to these kids.
And we would have students leading. So we would start off leading and doing, and then no. And then they would take over.
Yeah.
And so we just sat back and watched the magic happen. And there were times we would just look at each other and we're like, okay, I can't believe this happened. We're really doing it. Okay, it's working.
We fully intended on getting a video of this happening, but the end of the school year just turned into chaos. There was another quarantining outbreak, and then it just was like, okay, we're not doing this. Let's not put that added pressure on ourselves. But it was a thing of beauty. These kids would just lead the class basically. And it wasn't, at first it was just 1 or 2 kids, but by the end, some of these kids that you would never imagine standing up and taking ownership over a class and running a class essentially were doing it. It was beautiful to see.
We created a little family with these 8 students.
Yeah.
The 2 of us. And they fought like brothers and sisters all the time, but they held each other accountable.
They did.
And it was great to see. Now, the Easy CBM you'll see from the fall, winter, and spring scores. Once again.
So this is the comprehension portion of it. The blue is the fall. So there's good things and bad things about the Easy CBM. I don't know how many of you utilize this. There's 3 different sections. There's fluency, there's comprehension, there's vocabulary. There's only 20 comprehension questions. So if you did okay to start, if you made a mistake, it looked like you did terribly on the second one. And if you know what I mean? It was hard to, if you did really well, it was hard to continue, not hard to, but you had to be on your game to make sure that you didn't drop in your percentage. So looking at these scores, everybody increased except for the one student in the middle who, when we were taking the spring test, there were some things going on with this person, and it doesn't surprise me that their score reflected that. But other than that, every single person, and it was a conversation. It was, don't forget, we're looking at your growth. We're looking to see where you are. And they would say, hey, what was my score last time? I need to get above that. Okay, I got this. And they worked hard at it. I guess there's 2 because we had another student who was out of school for several weeks and didn't take the spring comprehension test. And then like I said, the one student who really had things going on. So,
but we saw growth from fall to spring in all of our students. And once
Yeah.
again, our select student, Richard, you saw every time got better.
Yes.
And he was so proud
He
of
was,
himself.
yeah.
And that makes it all worthwhile. So this is the vocabulary. Once again, this is only 20 questions. And if they, blew through it at the beginning, in the fall, we had a couple kids who just blew through it and didn't even try. So we reset it and made them start and actually try so that we could once again see their growth and they would understand why we were doing what we were doing. And as you can see, either they maintained or they grew. And
Yeah. And I think the vocabulary is the weakest part of the Easy CBM by far. It's the same words. It's the same patterns. It's the same 20 questions. So again, if you scored 16, 17 at the beginning, it didn't show much growth. And I think I feel like that's unfair. I do. So
yep,
that's either here or there, I guess.
So this was their fluency on the Easy CBM. The first fluency was the one that we tested them in class. This was the Easy CBM fluency. And you'll see the winter section, everyone scored lower. That section on the Easy CBM, that passage is so difficult. It is not one that you can read easily. Even as a fluid reader, the wording is just not how we normally speak.
It's very awkward.
So we were not surprised with these scores. And this is part of the reason why we're not using ECCBM next year. But you'll still see from fall to spring, once again, lots of growth.
And I want to, before Jamie changes the slide, the third student from the right, she is the other special ed student who was not in the additional reading class. So she simply had English with Jamie, reading with me, and then the intervention class. Her fluency went up 27 points from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. And it's almost emotional to talk about it. Like, she was the most unconfident, argumentative.
I don't want to be here, kids.
This is stupid at the beginning. And by the end, she was one of the leaders in the class.
And she thanked us.
She thanked us and said that, like, I learned so much this year and I don't think I would have if it wasn't for the two of you. Like, she saw in herself the growth that she had and like her potential in a way that she had never seen before. And it was so touching and rewarding for us to see this with these kids. Like, I'm so excited to get started next year with a bigger group now that I have a year under my belt, know what to do with it. Like, I'm so excited to see this continue because it lit a fire under them. It really did. Go back. I have to say, on there, we did the fluency and he asked me what his fluency score was. I told him the number. We looked at the chart and he was like, so if I get to the end of this paragraph, I got it, right? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. I got this. And then started reading. And he was like, he sped read in a way that, like, you probably shouldn't, but he did it without making any sort of mistakes and like just crushed it and was like, yeah, and like, let's go, as he's walking away from reading, from taking a fluency test like he was in the middle of a game. It was hilarious and just like beautiful to see how pumped he was to get better. All right, now you can.
Okay, so where are we going now? So our district has purchased Common Lit Pro with diagnostics for us to use instead of and as a supplement for Easy CBM. We're also using Cadence Learning to replace the Easy CBM, which gives them a chance to, if they test here, then the next time they move to a separate one, a different one. They're actually going what is based on their strength and not everybody taking the exact same thing. So we're hoping that will show us even better data than we've had before.
That's for the Acadians.
Yes.
And Common Lit, I think it's going to help us address the comprehension portion of MTSS in a way that we didn't have any real combined source to do. That was still one piece of it that was just totally piecemeal. It was things that I have taught for multiple years. It was the way that Jamie has taught for multiple years, and not the way, but the reading, the text that we used. It was just little pieces of different things that we used in no particular order. So I am like thrilled to be able to say, okay, Commonlet, show me which unit I'm doing. Give me the questions for it. I'll still put my creative spin on it because I can't function in a world where I'm just asking the students to answer questions. Like, that won't happen. But I will be able to just already have everything laid out for me. And we'll be able to dig deeper into comprehension, because everything I've used with Commonlet already, the comprehension questions are rigorous. They are very rigorous, which is important. This year, because 7th grade took Vocab Surge A over for the second half of the year in 21-22, I will be starting with Vocab Surge B and then move into SERP words, which was something that was recommended to us. It's specific vocabulary words that we can do different activities with. I plan on actually combining the two of those and working through that Monday through Thursday to continue building morpheme awareness, continue working on vocabulary, and growing their vocabulary, because that's super important. However, we also got 6-Minute Solution, which is a program where it's student-led and the kids time each other and work on fluency. Yes, SERP is the publisher of WordGen. 6-Minute Solution, the kids work on fluency every week. We worked specifically with our intervention group on fluency, and we saw like such incredible gains for them. So I'm so excited to just do this in my general reading classes with the students and see where they go, because I feel like I can take that energy that we created in the intervention class and apply it to all the kids, get them excited about getting better, get them excited about working harder to be more fluent as readers. So I'll do those on Fridays. So every week I'll start my class 10 minutes with vocabulary, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then the 6-Minute Solution. Says 6 minutes. We'll see how long it actually takes because I haven't done it yet, but that'll be about, I would assume, the first 10 or so minutes of class on Fridays to address comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency, which I'm super excited. I've never had all 3 pieces in front of me ready to use. I'm pumped.
And I will continue to use the Step Up to Writing and the Start Pod to build their writing skills and their quick writing skills. And I will also be using the Common Lit, where April and I will work together, where she'll have the text and they'll write about it for me in class. We've done that for years. That's nothing new, but able to have it all in one place and both of us to be able to see the same thing at the same time, that's going to be the glorious part for us, because when she sees where they stand in their writing and I see where they stood in their comprehension, we can actually work together and make it even better. And as we said, the Acadians Learning is going to replace the Easy CBM. This was the old Dibbles, I believe, is what we were told. So the elementary's using this, and then they asked us if we wanted to use it as well, and we said yes, because as we said, Easy CBM was definitely not what we wanted to see for our students. We definitely want them to be able to test and move along and not just keep taking the same thing, because then they'll actually care and show ownership for it. So.
Right, because from what I see, and I dove a little deeper with Acadians Learning, and it has 3 different components. Everyone takes the first round like a benchmark test. If they score below grade level, they have to take the second round. And then if they're below or well below grade level, they'll have to go on to the 3rd round. So I feel like this will put a little more pressure on the kids to actually try, which with Easy CBM, it was on the computer. Once they completed it, if I felt like they flew through it, I would have to go through multiple steps to get it deleted. And I could threaten it all day, but it was actually emailing another person down in central office and having them delete the score, and then emailing me to tell me the score was deleted, and then me having to track that kid down to retake the test, where this is just what happens. If you don't try your best and score, Okay, I see somebody saying they use Acadian and Straight, and I'm super excited to hear that, because that's what it looked great. It looked like what we wanted, something to hold them more accountable and not test the highest achieving at fluency when they're like just blowing the fluency off the chart, but because it's a benchmark and part of it, they have to take that test. So I'm excited to hear that. Thank you.
Yes. And then essentially that's it. MTSS in the midst of chaos.
We did it, and we saw growth, and the more we did, the more excited we were. And it felt overwhelming at first. It really did. It felt so overwhelming and just like, wow, how are we ever going to do this? But one piece at a time, just starting with one little thing, turned it, like snowballed into these increases that we saw, and the excitement in the kids that we were like, oh, this is happening. Oh my gosh. So that's it.
So I'm going to put in the chat the resources that we used, that we talked about through all of this. I thought I was sending it to everyone, but I've been sending it to Lisa over and over again. Sorry about that, Lisa.
And then our emails are here. If anyone has any questions, even if it's during the middle of the school year, if you're trying something and you want to just use us as a sounding board, you're welcome to email us, because we're those girls. We'll help you.
Absolutely. We will.